my name is Christy Chandler, and I am the Senior Vice President of Admissions at Chapel Haven Schleifer Center, which is located in New Haven, Connecticut. I have been here, August will be 14 years, which is crazy. I started out here as a special education teacher in one of our transition programs. So what I'm sharing about today is near and dear to my heart. I have lived it and breathed it. And then I transitioned into the admission side of things after a few years in the classroom. So today I'm going to start by just sharing with you about what a transition program is. And really, it's like a college experience for how to become a successful adult. There are lots of different kinds of transition programs. Some of them are specifically focused on a college experience or a supported college experience. The one that I'm going to talk about at Chapel Haven today has always been a little bit more of a holistic model where our intention and goal is to support adults with learning how to live out in the community in their own apartment, having a job, having friends, and knowing how to access their community resources. And so I'll talk a little bit more as we get into things about what that looks like here. But the reason that transition programs matter is you're really helping the young adult to up their levels of independence, which is going to, decrease reliance upon families. It can also decrease reliance upon the need for additional funding through state services and things like that. And certainly we all know that, the more independent we are and the more agency we have, the better that we feel about ourselves. So another important reason to consider transition programs too is it really gives adults the opportunity to build a social network. And we frequently hear from families that, once they exit the school system, whether that's at 18 or 22 or somewhere in between, you lose a lot of those natural support systems that give them opportunities to connect with other peers. So having the opportunity to do that through a transition program is really meaningful. So when you're thinking about what you want to have included in a transition program, it's really to think about, what the adult's goal is. And then you want to look, so like if the goal is to live out in the community in their own apartment, then you certainly want to look for a program where they can practice apartment life, with support and instruction over time. If it's to go on to get a college degree, it'll be important that there's a college support component in there, including dorm life. So really you want to think about what are the skills that are missing right now that would get them to that next goal that they have for themselves. And ideally, you're having that conversation with your school district team so that they are assisting with that process while the student is still in high school, but also maybe even still in their transition program. And if they can't provide that in the transition program, then maybe they make referrals to outside agency programs where that could be provided. And just some important notes to think about whenever you're evaluating a program. I will say transition programs have exploded over probably the last 5 to 10 years. You'd be hard pressed to look at a college these days that probably doesn't have some kind of transition program included in it. But you really want to be looking at things like how long has the program been around? Do they have identified curriculum? What is the staffing like? Sometimes there's programs that rely largely on student mentors to provide support in the program. And then other programs, you might find they have 24/7 staffing and a special education teacher. It's also really important to ask about accreditation. That's usually a great sign. That means that third-party organizations or agencies have taken a look at things, have met with stakeholders, and have kind of given, a thumbs up that there's quality programming and staffing and procedures and whatnot there. And then certainly you want to make sure you visit, right? And then whenever you're visiting, you want to talk to the students in the program. You want to talk to the staff in the program outside of just the admissions person, right? I think in doing that, it's even more beneficial than learning like all the facts about the program because you really can get a feel for a place and think about, can my young adult envision themselves in this community? And does it kind of have that feeling that we would want it to have? Because that community connection is going to be a really important piece. So that's your kind of PSA on why transition programs are important, and we hope you all consider them. And now I'm going to segue into just giving you a little bit of history about how Chapel Haven started. As with many of the programs that I've seen featured here on Together for Choice, it was family driven. There were a couple of families whose young adults had started out in Maplebrook School, which is up in Amenia, New York, and they had graduated from the special education high school, and they thought, well, what happens now? And so one of the families was a realtor, and they thought, all right, we'll buy this house down on Chapel Street, and we'll get a couple of people to teach them how to take the bus, how to budget, how to grocery shop, how to prepare their meals. And they may end up coming back home, but, at least they'll be more independent once they've completed, a little more education. And what they found was that they did not need to go back home, nor did they want to go back home, because they had a community of friends. They had a knowledge of the community resources and how to navigate those successfully. And so they were able to continue living independently with just a little bit of ongoing a la carte supports along the way. So we moved to this current location that we are still in today, back in 1976. The red brick building that you see pictured there is still on our campus. And I have to say, we've always had a soft spot in our heart for that building. It is not the most glamorous one on campus, but it has served us really well over the years, including most recently, we had a little bit of an issue with extreme cold weather, which caused some damage to one of our buildings. We were able to come back to that beloved old red brick building and keep services humming along there. So it's been a great thing for us. One of the things that is also important, I should have said, when thinking about a transition program, and I think one of the things that has really contributed to the success of Chapel Haven is our location. So we're in New Haven, Connecticut, which is a city. It's not huge like Atlanta or New York City, but it's got enough that you've got some cultural resources. We've got several universities in the area. But then more specifically, there's the Westville neighborhood, which definitely has a small village-like feel. The bus stop's right in front of our campus. You can easily walk to places to get your hair cut, to go out for a meal with friends, to do some local shopping. And so it's a place that has really served as an extension of the classroom setting for us, because the adults that we work with learn how to build their social skills and their community safety skills. But it's also the place where they, do their banking and do their shopping and their eating out and their time with friends. So we're really, really appreciative of that local community that we're a part of. So as we continued throughout the years, we were kind of humming along with just one core program, if you will. And then in the early 2000s, we started to get a lot of calls from families about students who had an Asperger diagnosis and wanting to know if that was something that we could serve in our existing program. And we recognized that we had a lot of pieces that would be beneficial for that type of cohort, but we also recognized that there was a significant need for a particular approach with social communication competencies and skills, executive functioning strategies that could be further fleshed out. And so we worked with a team from the Yale Child Study Center and several other autism experts in the field. We had an advisory committee that helped us to develop a curriculum that still led to the same outcomes as the goals that we had originally had of independent living and jobs and friends, but used a curriculum-based approach to specifically meet the needs of that group. So that program continues into existence today. And one of the things that we were able to add through that program is a support for students who want to take part in college classes while they're doing their transition programming. Back in 2017, I talked about we had that beloved red brick building where everything was run out of. And quite frankly, we were running out of space. And also, it was just time for our buildings to be designed with the same thoughtfulness that our curriculum was. And so we embarked on a really large campus expansion program where we were able to offer a new transition building for students in the REACH program, and to also offer housing for graduates who wanted to continue to live on campus long term as part of our SAIL program. And I'll explain a little bit more about what those are here in just a minute. And then most recently, our newest addition is something called CATCH. I know special ed is rife with acronyms, and we are too. So CATCH just stands for Connecting Adults to Chapel Haven. And as with our growth throughout all these years, each addition or change that we've made has really been in response to the needs of the adults that we're already serving, or to a demand that we're seeing from the community that we feel like aligns with our mission and would allow us to serve additional folks. And so the CATCH program was introduced this past year so that we could welcome adults that were maybe midlife or even older, and give them the opportunity to live on campus for a short period of time, like a year or maybe even less, get them acclimated to the Chapel Haven ways, build some social networks and friends, get comfortable with the Westville community, and then help them segue into the most appropriate long-term supported graduate community for them. So we welcomed 7 folks this year. Ellen, that you see on the screen there, she had been living in her own apartment for many, many, many years. She'd been working as a laundry shop attendant for many, many years at a family-run or friend of a family-run place. And her family was recognizing that they were aging, Ellen was aging, and really wanted her to be able to continue her independence within the context of a supported community whenever maybe that current situation couldn't sustain itself any longer. And so Ellen's been living on campus, been thriving, loving taking part in many of the adult ed classes that we offer. So we're really excited to have this open up a new pathway for folks. And so starting back in 1972 and growing all these 50-something years, we now serve a little over 250 adults between those that live on campus and those that live off campus as part of our graduate community. And I'll show you that breakdown in just a minute. There's so many lovely faces here. I could tell stories about each of them, but David, who's got the little sunshine on him, David was a college graduate. He had his degree in engineering, and he had been living with his parents for several years after college, had gotten some jobs, but had struggled to keep the jobs. And so was kind of stuck in this area of like doing some TaskRabbit things here and there, kind of pursuing his passion of Legos, but really not able to connect with a community of friends and really not able to step out in the way that he wanted to as a young adult. And so part of the reason I love David's story is because he was a good candidate for our ASAP program. So that's sort of Asperger-ish profile. And he knew that we served a broad community of adults here at Chapel Haven. And so he was really mindful and thoughtful about wanting to make sure that the peer cohort here at Chapel Haven felt like his people, felt like people that he could make friends with and build relationships with. And so throughout our admissions process, he got to meet and engage with several different people. And it was just so lovely to see him come to a place where not only did he feel comfortable with the community as a whole, but he felt like he really connected with people in a meaningful way where he could start to develop some adult friendships, which he had not really had before. And then to boot on that is he is now working at an engineering company and doing well and driving himself to and from work. And so we've just been super proud of him. He's in the process of completing up his second year right now and already has plans to have an apartment in the area as part of the graduate community. So lots of exciting stories. So as you can see from this chart, the graduate community really does make up the bulk of who is in that 250 adults at Chapel Haven. Both of the transition programs, I should say all 3 of the transition programs now, so REACH, residential education at Chapel Haven, I'm going to show you who that is geared towards in a minute. our Asperger Syndrome Adult Transition Program, and then our Catch program for those mid and older adults, are just kind of a small starting point, right? And then from there, they develop those skills, they save the supports, and then they're able to transition into one of the graduate options from there. And I'll kind of break down what those look like here in just a minute. So when a family first calls into the admissions office and talks with me, I'm usually trying to suss out, which program is an appropriate starting point to talk about. I mentioned that we added ASAT on down the road so that we could tweak the curriculum and include some components that would better support students with that autism level 1 type of profile. So all of these programs that you see listed here have the same end goal. We want the adults to become as independent as possible. We want them to be able to transition into the graduate community of their choice, and we want them to be able to sustain that independence for the long term. And so you can see here some of the similarities in the kind of nuts and bolts of the programs. There is some difference between the level of staffing that is offered, particularly in the overnight hours for some of the programs. And that largely depends on prior life experiences and some of the abilities that may come along with being able to do a little bit more abstract thinking and reasoning that might be tough for some of our more concrete thinkers and learners. The annual tuition, though, for both the REACH and the ASAT program include a monthly allowance, and that's because that's a really key component for our budgeting purposes. Every week, students complete a budgeting class or a budgeting session so that they're setting aside money to buy their groceries, their apartment supplies, pay for activities that they're going to be doing on the weekends. So they're getting that real life practice of, allocating their wants and their needs. All of the programs include life skills. So that's where a staff person is working with the adult or the student in their apartment to either cook dinner and to also learn how to complete different apartment chores. So they're mopping, they're swiffering, they're vacuuming, they're cleaning the bathrooms, they're cleaning their bedrooms, they're learning how to wash your sheets on a weekly basis. So all very practical things that are happening in real time, and building routines and systems with them that as they become more independent with them, staff can begin to kind of fade back from that, and then they can carry that forward with them into their long-term graduate community. The Catch program, you might see, just if you're looking at numbers like 30 hours a week versus 20 hours a week, that's really because many of the folks in Catch have already had, some prior life experiences and developed a skill set of independent living skills where they probably aren't going to need as much instruction in that. And so we just scaled back some of those supports to meet them where they are. And again, to just kind of offer them the opportunity to get exposed to all the different offerings that our campus has to offer before helping them to segue into the graduate community. Speaking of graduate communities, we've got a few different options here. One is that folks who are headed towards life off campus, but maybe are looking to refine one or two more things before they do so, they have the option to go into the Bridge program. It literally is intended to be a bridge between comprehensive transition program life and independent graduate life. It allows them to continue to live on campus for one more year, but really starts to fade back some of the supports so that they can really have a softer launch into graduate life. Our supported living program and our ASAT community outreach services program, those are for folks who are going to move off campus after they graduate. They're going to rent an apartment or a condo just like you or I would. And then on average, they're going to get 3 to 4 hours a week of one-to-one supports from a staff person to help them with whatever their maintenance needs are, whether that's weekly budgeting, making sure there's healthy fruit in the fridge, making sure they're staying connected to their social community, signing up for rec activities. And the great thing about that is that number can go up and down over time as needed. And then everything that was included in their tuition-based program, when they were living on campus, all becomes a menu of a la carte options that they can pick and choose from. So if they still want to take part in weekend rec, they can do that. If they want to take an art class or a music class or an all about dogs class, those are still available to them as well. The SAIL program that's listed down at the bottom, that program evolved out of needs for folks who were graduating, still wanted independence and had a lot of skills, but really just would benefit from having kind of that day-to-day oversight rather than the weekly oversight for the folks that are living out in the community. And so that program is based in one of our new buildings that was finished up in 2020. It has 42 1- and 2-bedroom apartments. And I'm sorry, that's not true. It has 1- and 2-bedroom apartments. There's a total of 42 adults that are living there right now. And it's really a supported home base. So they all still have very individualized schedules that they may choose to do some day programming with us. They might choose to do a couple of classes. They might choose to do none of that and, instead to be out exploring the neighborhood, doing some volunteer work, working at their job. But just like in the other graduate communities, they can pick and choose from that a la carte programming to create a daily and a weekly schedule that meets their needs. Okay, so I've been throwing a lot of acronyms at you in terms of REACH and ASAT and SAIL, and this is just to give you a breakdown about what a potential student might look like, so kind of a learning profile. The REACH program, that was the one we started with way back when, and it really serves a broad range of young adults who are typically between the ages of about 18 and 30. Some of them are coming right out of high school. Some of them might have done some transition programming either through their local school district or through another program like a Riverview or a Maplebrook. And some of them are even coming to us, after they've just been home for a few years and they're in their mid-20s. But they typically have either a mild intellectual disability as part of their profile, or may not have an intellectual disability at all, but just very concrete thinkers and learners. They do really well with systems and routines that they can learn and practice and refine over time. They overall tend to be a pretty social group. That's a pretty general statement, but I would say they're the ones that if you visit campus, most likely you're going to come up and say, hey, how are you? Who are you? Where are you from? I'm from here. But they tend to need some help with broadening the things that they have conversations about, and then also the nuances of how to really start building meaningful adult friendships and how to keep those going. The students in the ASAP program, as I mentioned before, it was initially named and based on an Asperger profile. We recognize that is not an official diagnosis anymore, although many of the adults in the families that we work with do tend to identify with that. But these are for folks who typically learn how to do things pretty quickly. But for them, it's really spending a lot more time understanding the why behind it all in order for them to understand its meaning, understand the impact it's going to have on the goals that they have for themselves, and then reliably execute those things on a regular basis. So, if I have a job interview at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, like why it might matter if I stay up until 1 a.m. and I don't take a shower and maybe I don't have my work outfit, my interview outfit picked up for the next morning. So some of the students in this program might be at the early beginnings of exploring college. Some of them may have gone to college and had some mixed success there. And some of the students, like Liam that's pictured here, completed college. They came to us, and like David, I mentioned earlier, they came to us having already completed their degrees, and we're really looking to transition their learning into full independent life, right? So different than dorm life, or maybe you're eating in a cafeteria and things like that. And then also transition into the world of work and then full, adult life from there. And then, as I mentioned before, our CATCH program. So this program can have leanings towards the REACH population or leanings towards the ASAP population. So whoever would have been a good fit for either of those can be a candidate for CATCH. The thing that's different is that they are probably a little further along in life, so like mid-30s, pushing onward, and they've probably already had some experiences with either full independent living or some kind of supported independent living, or maybe some kind of like really extensive transition programming. So no matter which one of those transition programs that you start in, and this is one of the things that really does make Chapel Haven unique in the world of transition programs, is that it's not just a place where you come and you learn for a short amount of time. It's a place where you come and you develop those skills, and most of the adults choose to stay on for the long term. So you can kind of see our statistic there that historically, roughly 80% or so of the graduates will choose to transition into one of those ongoing communities that I talked about. Actually asked me to include some lessons learned, because one of the things I've always appreciated is, you know, feedback for learning for folks that are looking to maybe start their own transition program or other supported living programs. So location and access to amenities, that's definitely key, especially if you're thinking about what life will look like for the adults once they complete programming on your campus, right? So for us, like, it was really important that they could continue to access things in the same way, whether there was a staff person with them or not. And so having walking capabilities, having public transportation access is really crucial to the ongoing success for our community. And also just really cool to see how well we are integrated into the community. Westville's kind of become a hip hotspot in the New Haven area. There's a lot of cute cafes and vintage stores and things like that. And I love nothing more than coming down on the weekends to go out to lunch and do some shopping with a friend of mine, than to, you know, bump into some Chapel Haven adults who are out doing the exact same thing with their friends that I am with mine. I mentioned before, whenever we were thinking about adding on the ASAP program, that we recognized we needed some help in tailoring the curriculum to address the needs of that learning profile. And so just really important to think about, you know, one size isn't going to fit all. And so how can you partner with or learn from other experts in the field to help you tweak or develop curriculum? I'll also say, just to add on to that too, that measuring progress, that's another really important thing to ask about when you're considering transition programs. We actually do progress monitoring or assessment as part of our admissions process. And then throughout the student's time in the program, at roughly the 45-day mark, the year mark, and the 18-month mark, we're setting and then reviewing goals and objectives that the adult has set to drive their programming, and benchmarking their progress on how they're doing with that. So if you are developing a program, definitely think about how you're going to measure that progress and how you're going to communicate that to all the stakeholders that are involved. This other one I'm throwing in because our president, I said, what are some important lessons that we've learned? And he shared this one. So it's really that think very carefully about, if you're building buildings, think about how you're going to plan for maintaining those buildings. New buildings look lovely, but they are, in fact, expensive to maintain. So you've got to make sure that you're planning for that and have the funds secured for that. And then it's also really important to think about how to maximize your revenue producing spaces. And this kind of ties in with my first point about your location and your access to amenities within the community. You know, we're in an area where we have gyms and cafes, and the Jewish Community Center is very close to us. And so instead of us needing to provide all those things on our on our campus, we want to have adults utilize those community resources, which furthers our mission of helping them to be more independent, but then also allows us to include spaces on campus that are going to help us to meet our budgeting needs, and then also help us to be able to afford to maintain those buildings over time. And then the last point I'll add is just about employment. So that was definitely a growth area for Chapel Haven since I came in 2012. we've always had volunteer sites and intern sites and really worked a lot on soft skills while students were in their transition program to help prepare them for the world of work. And then in 2017, we received a grant to really help us become more strategic in our employment efforts. And as a result, we have really learned a lot about the importance of customized employment, but we've also learned a lot about that sometimes it just takes time, right? It takes time for the young adult to learn what they're really interested in doing. They need a lot of exposure to figure that out sometimes, to learn what they don't like as well as what they do like. And they need job coaching to help them make that transition into the competitive job, time to make sure that the employer feels comfortable with the adult and their role and how to problem solve. And so even though families especially, I find, are super eager to find out, like, when are they going to get a job and when are they going to get that paycheck? We have learned that it's not just about getting the job, but it's about the ability to keep and retain the job for a long term. And that whenever we do that really steady, methodical approach to it, we have seen outcomes where the majority of students that are placed through our Career Ability program are meeting not only 90-day retention marks, but 6-month and 12-month retention marks. So know that that can be a little bit of a tough cookie and that it can take time, but like if you take that slow, steady approach, it really does yield some fantastic outcomes. Okay, and then just started about funding. So because we do a lot of different things, we get funding from some different ways. One way is that we're an approved school in Connecticut and Massachusetts. So some school districts will pay for students to take part in our programming, which could just be as a day student. So they might just come Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. and still take part in that same transition programming. In that instance, families can choose to pay for the residential piece so that they can become a residential student as well. But sometimes school districts will fund the whole placement, and that really is a super individualized process. It depends on the young adult, what's on their IEP goals and objectives, and the kind of program that the school district already has in place. But for those of you that are families out there watching, if your child is at least 14 years of age, please make sure that you are advocating to have those transition conversations right now. Don't wait until their senior year of high school and the last 6 months before they may or may not be exiting. You really want to start planning for that ahead. Other ways that we get funding at Chapel Haven, and this comes in through our graduate community, is through our Department of Developmental Services. So that's a state agency that some folks can qualify. There's some IQ requirements, some adaptive skill requirements, and some age requirements, but it can lead to people getting funding for us to provide some of those ongoing a la carte supports that happen either in their home or out in the community. It could also potentially fund adult day programming that we have on campus, as well as some of the vocational supports that I was describing earlier. We did develop a needs-based scholarship that families can apply for as well. So we use a third-party agency that will do a full financial review with the family and then make some recommendations to our scholarship committee based on demonstrated need. And then our scholarship committee will make the final determination based on the need, the available funds, and some additional criteria. But that's something we haven't always had. That's just been in the last maybe 5 to 7 years. So we've been super excited to make that available. Definitely talk to your financial planners, your special needs financial planners, about ABLE accounts and 529 plans. Different programs can potentially use those or not use those in different ways. So that's another important question to ask whenever you are considering programs, and especially if you're considering how to pay for it. So at Chapel Haven, we do not have the ability to receive 529 plans, but there definitely are other programs that can access federal education funds where you might be able to utilize that. And then just a note, this is starting to get outside of my particular expertise, but Ashley asked to include it here. So, our annual budget is approximately $12 million, and our president does do annual fundraising to help us meet our annual budget needs, because we want to make our program accessible and, are not charging what the program actually costs to run for adults to get the level of support and staffing that we think is important. So have to do a little bit of makeup with that as well. And then what's coming next? So I've been super proud of how Chapel Haven has continued to grow over the years, and some of that has come through our accreditation body. CARF is really great about helping you to continue to look for ways to grow and develop. So some of the ones that are listed here are related to accessibility and aging. I didn't mention before with our SAIL program, and I should have, that part of the reason we developed SAIL was not only to provide a supported graduate options for folks who maybe had a little higher support needs, but it was also a way for people who had been living out in our neighborhood for 20, 30, 40 years, and they were starting to get older. And the aging needs were actually preventing them from maintaining their level of independence out in the community, more so than their disability-related needs. And so the SAIL program was physically designed in a way where folks could move back to campus, and families could partner with healthcare agencies, personal care attendants, skilled nursing components to bring those supports in, so that the folks could age in place in this community that they had been a part of for so long, rather than having to leave and go to a nursing home or an assisted living facility. That said, we are in the throes of learning all about what that really means to age in place. One of the cool things that the Aging Committee is working on right now is a life plan that is going to lay out, kind of decade by decade, key things that the adults should be engaging with in terms of healthcare, proactive measures, but also that families should be thinking about in terms of long-term planning for their loved one, and that if there's guardianship, that who becomes a guardian if the parent isn't available, or if there's no family and no siblings, then how do we ensure that the adult still has an advocate and someone who can assist them through the process? That's one of the things that's listed on the bullet there. That's what our SAFE program is it has a court-appointed person who will still act as an outside advocate for adults to ensure they're getting the services and the supports that they need. We've also been doing a lot with assistive technology lately, including we did the Great Give last year and raised several $1,000s to help us to get some additional tools on campus for the adults to use. And then also have had support from a professor at one of the local universities who's come over and done staff training, as well as some training for the adults that we work with, so that we can just broaden ways for people to access those daily needs. And then the last thing that is coming is that beloved red brick building is going to get a bit of an overhaul. I think it's going to stay in place. It's just not going to look quite the same. But because the SAIL program is full, and because we are offering more options for folks who are, midlife or later, we are recognizing that we need some additional space on campus. And so we hope to be engaging in a final phase of campus renovations, where we will add some additional on-campus housing, and then also just offer up some updated spaces for folks that are in the Catch Transition program and the ASAP program, who are using some of those livingly used buildings for now. So that is it. I am happy to chat and answer questions to the best of my ability. And again, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today.